listening to She Rises, a podcast dedicated to women who are ready to stop settling and start living their lives by design. If you're ready to talk about the stuff that weighs you down and get practical advice on everything from your health, body image, spirituality, relationships, and personal growth, then you're in the right place. Hello, I'm Giovanna, your host, master coach, spiritual teacher, and mind-body expert, and I'm on a mission to unsettle women all over the world. Are you ready to rise? Hi there, and welcome to the show again. Welcome back. It's Giovanna, your host, and I'm here with the beautiful and talented and very present, lovely woman, Kendra Cunov. I'm so excited to have her on the show today. You guys are going to love this topic. It's juicy. It's interesting. I've already warned Kendra there might be a part 2 because there's just so much to say about authentic relating and everything she brings to the world and all of her magic. And I want to start off with reading a quote. It's actually a testimonial from Rich Litvin, who is the co-author of The Prosperous Coach and the founder of 4PC. And I want to read it because it's just so eloquent, and it's exactly how I feel about Kendra in a lot of ways, and it's a beautiful quote. So he says that Kendra is one of the most powerful coaches and leaders I know. If you're looking to deepen your personal relationships, grow your business, build your team, or improve the communication and leadership skills of your team leaders, you would be well served to work with Kendra. Her guidance has supported me in scaling my events while simultaneously creating even deeper and more intimate experiences for our participants. Her impact is magical, and I can attest to that. Her impact is definitely magical. Kendra is the co-founder of Authentic World. She has been teaching, facilitating, and most importantly, practicing authentic relating and integral circling for the last 15 years. She works with organizations, leaders, and coaches who know that connection, truth, and integrity are actually access points to success. Kendra has consulted for companies such as Gentech and is currently on staff for 4PC, an elite mastermind for the top 4% of coaches in the world. She brings a genuine care for people as well as an extraordinary depth of insight in service of people living truly fulfilled lives. You can find out more about Kendra at kendracunov.com. But for now, Kendra, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's always a little funny to hear your own bio back.
Isn't it? Isn't it? And even a testimonial, we're like, wow, people said that about me. That's so nice of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, like I said before we officially popped on and started recording, I'm really, truly honored to have you here, and I'm excited. We've known each other just over a year now, and I have literally always wanted to sit down and pick your brain. And to me, who you are for me is powerful presence. And I so respect and admire that. And I know that our listeners today are gonna get some of that for sure, just even hearing your voice and your wisdom. So thank you again.
Well, thank you, Giovanna. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah.
I would love to dive into your amazing life beginnings and your story and really how it is that you got to do the work that you do now. Would you share that with us?
Gosh. I think there's pieces of, sometimes I look at my life and I think how did I get here? And then other times, I can see a lot of the pathways and some of it, I think I've been enormously blessed in my life. As you were mentioning before we got on, I was basically born into a Zen Buddhist monastery. And there's a ways that I think I can't even actually calculate the impact that had on my life because it just was my life,
What was that like?
I think about it more sometimes as, so I went back and I actually lived there for 3 years as an adult. And I spent also a lot of my summers there as a teenager. And sometimes it's easier for me to see wow, what I'm most grateful for is that was the place I could call home and go back to. Because those early years of my life, it just so much was my life that it's hard for me to even say, what was that like? But the other way that I do look at it is I actually moved with my mother when I was 5 and we left the monastery proper. And that is actually a dramatic moment in my life. And when I look back, I have virtually no specific memories. I have just a couple, but I have no like those really clear memories from before that time. And then when we moved, all my memories become very, very sharp and clear. And so a lot of how I think that those early years in the monastery is I think that I felt so held that it lived almost more in this golden glow, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I think I felt very, one of the things that afforded me was this real feeling of safety in those very, very early years of my life, that it was a very small community. There were other children there, and that it's a small community, but it's also this very small valley. And so the whole experience was just very held in that space.
I know it's difficult to sort of look back at something that, that was your normal, right? So it's kind of hard to look back at something like that and really break down how that impacted you. But going forward, into what you then became the founder and creator of, with authentic relating and the type of work that you do with deep presence and communication and intimacy, for me as an outsider, it's almost like I look at that and go, well, of course that was an influence and came about. And tell us a little bit more about that area of your life and maybe how your development, maybe early on, of this, deep presence or inner peace has actually affected you throughout your life.
Yeah. I think there's two pieces to that. And the first is that I do think that being surrounded by people who were intentionally, whether they called it a path of personal growth or whatever they were calling it at that time, I think that had a deep impact on me. That basically the people who were closest to me and closest to my family, and really that I still feel very close to some of those people in my life. They're very, very dear to me. That being around people who had made such a commitment in their lives to step outside of what might be considered normal or the culture at large and live in a monastery, that I think can't be underestimated. So some sense of presence or working on yourself or a commitment to something deeper, that was the field that I grew up in. Even if it wasn't talked about all the time or taught or, to me as a child. And then the second piece is that I remember when I was living in the monastery again, and I was about 19 years old. I left college. I always say I left college and I finished in the monastery instead. So, that was my training ground. So I was about 19 years old or 20, and I looked around, and this is really not to disparage the people or the relationships that were happening in the monastery, but I saw this group of people who were dedicated to awakening and dedicated to this personal path, and where at the same time I could see that there were interpersonal relationships that were still really wonky, or there were things within the community that just weren't talked about, or there was this other thing. And I thought, what is that? And so even before I had an idea of going into this realm in terms of my own work, or even before I was thinking about leaving the monastery, there was some part of me that was really curious about the interpersonal piece.
Okay. Yeah. So that's interesting, because that experience, or I guess observation of that sounds like really sparked you on this course of looking deeper into what makes relating and relationship tick. What does it make it work?
Yeah. And what does that, and I still, to me, I can just geek out on that.
Let's do it. I love geeking out. I love it.
Because I think, I still, when I work with clients or I work with groups, there's this dynamic tension, I think, between what is our solo experience or what's our personal experience, and then what is the interpersonal, both, say between just you and I, two people, but then also add a third or a fourth or a fifth or a whole room. And what are all these dynamics? And that our own personal practices and our own personal commitments, if you will, that's totally important. And so is this interpersonal piece. And they do impact each other, but they're not the same. Me just meditating solo every day won't necessarily improve my interpersonal relationships. And me working daily on my interpersonal relationships won't necessarily build this like my inner stamina, or that. So they're related, but they're not the same.
Yeah, I love that point that you just made, because it's true. You can do so much personal work on yourself. And like you said, you can meditate and you can take courses and you can do all of this stuff, but you're really doing it in a vacuum, because the test comes when you are in relationship, and it doesn't even have to be romantic relationship. It could be just in relation with the other. That's when, our mirrors are held up and all of, it's really when the tests come. I was just joking with a girlfriend about this the other night, and she was saying, I feel really good. I feel like I've worked out a lot of stuff, and, I feel like I'm ready to start dating. And of course I was comparing notes with her on my journey with that as well. And then I just started laughing, and I thought, well, the test will be, when that relationship actually comes. So, I want to dive right in there, actually, since we're going there anyway. Let's just dive right in. Let the audience know, and even for me, right? I'm just so curious. Like, tell us because you're a trailblazer in this, and we want to hear it right from you. What is authentic relating? How did this come to be, and what is it, so that the audience can really grasp what that is?
It's a great question, and I'll do my best. It's we all struggle with this, right? This piece of like, I know what it is that I do, but can I say what it is that I do?
Totally.
But I think I'll start with a little bit more on the structural side of where that came from. And certainly in one sense, it comes from a myriad of different communities and practices that came together. Some of it, I and others that I worked with just developed on our own. And then other pieces, I'm sure we borrowed, some knowingly, some unknowingly. But the very first piece of what we called authentic relating, if you will, it actually originated my ex-husband's business partner. So my ex-husband and his business partner, that's Kendra Cunov and Brian Bear, came together to create a program for men called the Authentic Man Program that's still running today. And we originally, so that was like the first piece that where I engaged in actually teaching myself. There was a course for men, and one part of that was a group of us women who would come in and actually practice with the men in kind of what you semi-real life real life exercises, if you will, and then give in the moment feedback about what it was actually like to be with them. Mm-hmm. And then we wanted to create, first of all, opportunities for people who were interested but maybe didn't want to dive into this super deep, intense 3-day weekend. And then also things for the men who wanted to continue. And what we realized was that actually this was this more community thing, even though we started it around this men's program, that what grew out of that was my then fiance and I, about every week for a while in our home, we had a loft space in San Francisco, and we would have about 30 or 40 people, and we would hold what we called authentic relating games nights. And the purpose was really to have fun with this, to explore, to experiment. We would do exercises and different, what we called games, basically because we wanted them to be fun. And it was creating experiences for people to connect in ways that they might not habitually do on their own.
Can you give us an example of one of those games or a scenario?
Yeah, some of it was, I would say two staples in that I still bring, and you've seen some of them, Giovanna, actually. Is just any sentence stem. So putting people in front of each other, and rather than just letting them fall into their habitual, what do you do and where are you from and the weather's nice, is having them fill in a sentence stem, like what I notice being with you, or what I think you think about me, or something I feel, let's see, might be something all the way on the range of like something I feel embarrassed to share with you, or if you really knew me, you'd know.
Mm-hmm. I have experienced these, and they're super powerful. For people listening, it's like, oh, whatever, a sentence stem, but it's not, because when you're face to face with someone and you're filling that in, that's intimacy at its best, right?
Yeah, and it's really exactly like you said, which is that when you're actually face to face with someone and then you're filling it in, you could think of all your answers to that just on your own listening to this podcast. But then there's like, oh, I'm standing across from Giovanna, and it's what comes up actually in relationship to you in that moment versus me already coming up with these things to share and making a plan about how I'm going to authentically relate. And it created this very, I don't know what the word is, but this beautiful community, honestly, because there were people who came regularly over and over, and it allowed people to share with each other in the ways that they were actually longing to, but didn't think they had permission to.
Mm.
And well, that to me has actually been this key piece that it was about 3 years in where we started facilitating these events for a dating company that was very popular in the Bay Area at the time. And, we'd been running these events for people that you might think would be into them. We were in our mid-20s, and we were kind of, edgy San Francisco types. And you're like, yeah, those are the authentic relating people. But we started, the dating company worked mostly with people who were more middle-aged, like I'm closer to where I'm at now, but this was 15 years ago, and older. So they were distinctly older than us. They were very professional. A lot of them had their own businesses. They owned their homes. They had been married. They had children. They had been divorced. They were, so they were a different subset of people. And there were two pieces about that. And one was that it really gave me this opportunity to see, like, this works with anybody. This isn't just your young 20-somethings who want to try something new. These people also loved it. And they were creating connections in ways that they also expressed, like, oh, I've been wanting this. Mm. And then the other piece that kept coming up, and it really percolated for me for a while, was they would say, well, you gave us permission.
Yeah.
But I heard that over and over and over from so many people that I thought, my God, like, what if we're all just waiting for permission?
Yes.
And I'm sitting here hoping the person next to me will give me permission, and they're hoping that I'll give them permission. And we're all afraid we don't have permission. And then we're just like dying to connect in this way.
I love that you just said that. And I'm so happy I let you finish that thought with the professionals that came into play and seeing that everybody wants this. And you used the word earlier, longing. And it's something that in my experience, I remember when you first ran your intimacy workshop early last year that I attended as a part of one of Rich Litvin's events. And you ran it with John, who you do these with quite often, and John Weiland, for everyone listening. And it was amazing to me because I was terrified to do it. And yet, as soon as we were in that, beautiful, amazing, safe incubator that you guys create with, by the way, not just like 8 people or 10 people, like we're talking, there was like 100 people there, I think, or close to.
Yes.
And just starting with the sentence stems and being in front of another human being, there was that sense of, your shoulders drop, and it is edgy and scary at first, but at the same time, it's that longing that is being fulfilled, that essential longing to connect in a real way, authentic way. And I'm so happy you used that word, because that was my experience and has been every time I've attended one of your events, of just this permission and letting go and, having that longing fulfilled. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, it feels good to hear, like, in some way, right, that longing's never totally fulfilled because we just, for our whole lives. But I feel the sense of fulfillment hearing that from you, because I'm like, yes, that's what I want to offer people, is that part of them can actually be met.
Yeah.
And
well, you do.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm so glad. Yeah.
Oh, so I would love if you could share with us, and we'll bounce back and forth here on different things, and I'm sure this will lead us down other little rabbit holes, but I would love if you could share something practical that maybe the women and even the men that are going to be listening to this can take home to their relationships, to whatever they may be, romantic or otherwise. But I think romantic is the one that really, pushes us and tests us the most, right? Is there anything practical that you can give the listeners right now that they can kind of experiment with in this area?
That's a great question. I'll start by saying that I am constantly doing this in my own relationships as well. And partly I say that to set it up that I think at whatever, if you want to call it a level or a layer, like wherever you're at, either in your relationship or in your experience of relating in this way, it's still applicable. And the other part I want to set up is I still get nervous. So if it feels edgy or it feels scary or you're like, just know, maybe this sounds scary, but there's a way that it never really goes away. And I think that's okay.
Yeah. And it's normal. It's fine.
It's so normal. I really did. I brought a whole new piece to my partner not that long ago. And I was so nervous that I got the giggles for 5 minutes. And then I was embarrassed because he'd sat there with me for 5 minutes while I had a giggle fit. And then it just had layers. And then I was like, okay, here's the thing. So,
I love that your nervousness comes out in giggles. I sit there and sob and not I like the ugly cry. It's not even I love that yours is giggles. I'm going to borrow that.
Yeah. And it can be, sometimes it's one, sometimes it's the other. So, here's what I would offer. And this is, again, it takes a little setup and you can either play it a little more formally or you can play it a little more informally. But there's something that is actually beautiful about setting a container, even if you're with a friend or you're with your lover or you're with your partner. Sometimes I think we get into this idea that it should all happen naturally. And if it doesn't happen naturally, then it's contrived. It's not authentic. But containers hold us. So that said, I'll explain the game that we play in some of our events and then talk a little bit about how you can apply that in a more casual way.
And just for the people listening as well, if you could explain a little bit about what is a container, what does that mean, and how do I set that up? Is that a bubble bath, a bottle of wine? What's the container?
Cool. That's such a great question, Giovanna. It's so good. And so sometimes we call it container. Sometimes I call it context, setting context. And both of these are things, I can give a little brief piece right here. We teach them very deeply in the program that John Wineland and I lead together and in the Authentic Relating Comprehensive in different ways. So these are things that we dive into incredibly deeply. But it is setting, it's the thing that has people say, oh, you gave us permission. It's saying, hey, I want to feel closer to you. Will you try something with me? And letting that person say yeah, sure. And then telling them what it is and how long you're going to do it for, right? Set people up so that they actually know what's happening and that they're not there all night.
Right. So ladies, don't corner your husbands or significant others, at the dinner table, clear the table. Okay, we're going to talk, because that doesn't ever go over well. It's not a good container.
Yeah, we need to have a talk that's a challenging one. But hey, I'm really wanting to feel closer to you. When's a good time for us? Especially if you're a woman talking to a man, said even ahead of time, checking in, when's a good time? Then gives them that opportunity to go oh, it's not right now. I just got home from work, but I'd love to do that with you at 7 or tomorrow night. I can make sure that I'm ready, right? So that in and of itself is actually starting to set the container or set context and allow them to meet you there so that they're actually ready for it. And then you both have more fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also too, I guess when we, in a sense, as women being, I guess, I shouldn't say because men are just as feeling, I find, but we just operate on a different level. I find men need that time. They can't just be, bombarded at the door. Come sit down. I want to do this thing with you. It's what? Wait, I was going to go, have a beer or whatever, have a bath
the thing I would say about it's both the male body and the masculine makeup, which are not, women are like this when we're in our masculine too. Yeah. But there is also something to the actual male physiology. So they're both there in a man, especially if he's come home from work, is that they're very single focused. And it's part of what we love about them. like, oh, they can really focus on something, or, oh, they can take care, it's actually like, oh, I love that capacity. And women have dispersed attention more naturally. It's both the female actual physiology, and it comes, partly from thousands of years of like watching the children and gathering the berries and aware of what's happening with the fire. And, that actually we've cultivated that in ourselves. And then the feminine nervous system, which is it's just everything. It's all the feelings. It's seeing the flowers outside at the same time that I'm thinking about this. And I'm like, like, so we're like, just be like that. It's really fun over here. And they're like, oh my God, you're fritzing my nervous system.
Totally. I love it. Yeah. It's a gift and a curse, right?
On both sides.
Exactly.
It's just appreciating how it's going like, oh, you're like that. Like, cool. You're not supposed to be like me.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for dropping that in, and how to set up the container in a nurturing, permissive way. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the game, the way that we would play it, kind of like dropping back into that, it's something we call curiosity. And it's generally, I would say, just start by playing it one-on-one. But the idea is that you actually tease apart these roles that we're often playing in conversation, of asking questions and responding, being curious and being responsive. And in our more habitual conversations, we both play both all the time. And it's part of what I think leads us to not dropping deeper, because we're always on alert for what's the next question I should ask and how am I going to respond? And rather than just dropping into one role at a time. So when we play curiosity, only one person asks questions and the other person only responds for a set period of time, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. And for the question asker, this is also what I would call setting the container or setting context, is saying nothing's off limits. You can ask any question you want. It doesn't matter how deep or how frivolous or off topic or like anything is. You can ask any question, and the only rule is you have to actually be curious.
Wow. I can literally feel people listening to this suddenly getting butterflies in their stomach with like, holy shit, what do you mean they could ask anything? But
right.
what that is the ultimate safety and intimacy in a relationship, isn't it?
It is. And the other side of that is the person answering the question, that their role is to answer in the way that's true for them right now. And that might be a one-word response. That might be sharing more deeply than they've ever shared in their life. And it might be saying, I don't feel comfortable answering that right now. And that by each person kind of agreeing to these pieces, they actually give the other person permission.
Oh, I like that. I really like that. So you set as part of the container and sort of the ground rules, your healthy boundaries, right? Like I don't feel comfortable answering that right now.
Right. But you don't set it up as a boundary ahead of time. You acknowledge that you'll do that in the moment. And that allows the person asking the questions to ask whatever they want, because they know that you'll say like, actually, I'm not going to answer that one right now. And the other person's been set up that that's okay. So they don't have to actually close their heart to do it.
Oh, I like that. I like that. So not ahead of time, but rather just saying in the moment, I'll sort of a moment to moment discretion.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then that gives it gives both people permission to actually be there, and just for the person asking questions to just follow, like, gosh, what am I really curious about? What do I really want to know about you? If I could ask you anything I wanted, which is we've just set the context that you can, what would I really ask you? And the other person just gets to respond in the moment with no pressure to have a conversation or to ask a question in response. And the beauty of this game is I've played this game and I've watched people play this game with people that they have only met for the very first time and literally been in tears. Or the response I get a lot when I lead this with people who are strangers to each other is, I had no idea I could feel this intimate with someone that I just met in 3 minutes.
Yeah, that was my experience. This is one of the games that I've played, I think, twice with you now in the container that you and John set up at one of your workshops. And it's quite intense. And what I love about it also is that, we tend to by nature be me focused, right? So, we're in this bubble oftentimes of what's going on with our lives and what are we feeling? And this is such a moment of genuine curiosity for another person that it demands that you be taken out of your me-centered focus. So I found when I started doing it, I was originally I don't even know. I don't even know what I want to know with this person. I don't know what I want to ask. And just dropping into that it's about them and my curiosity, it allowed me to kind of just, get over myself, as they say. And it does create a moment of intimacy because you're like you said, you're being curious about another. And it's a very interesting, deep exploration was my experience. And you can develop intimacy, like you said, in 3 minutes with someone you don't even know as a result.
And on the flip side, I have done this exercise and I've seen other people do it also with someone that they're already in partnership with or that they've known for a very, very long time. And I had also that experience, literally my partner and I at the time did this together and we were in tears. And so the beauty of this is where this kind of work is so amazing in relationship. It's so easy to think we know a person after a certain period of time. And honestly, there's a building of intimacy in our knowing on a certain level of another person, but there's actually a little bit of a loss of that real intimacy as soon as we think we know that person and that they're set. I know who they are. I know what they like. I no longer need to put my attention on them like they're a miracle in this moment.
Oh my God, that is so good. That is so good. That is definitely going to be a tweetable. Somehow, I got to shorten that and make that a tweetable from this. I love that because how many people do we speak to, whether they're clients or our friends or people that we know that, they've lost that love and feeling or the spark is gone. And I think you're right. I think a large part of that has to do with this kind of dissolving or fraying of intimacy. And that's beautiful the way you said it, simply for the fact that we're not looking at the other person as this ever-evolving, changing miracle and being curious about them. I have goosebumps. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And I actually think that combined with what you spoke to around that habit of being me-centered, we are. It's okay. It's normal. We all do
human.
It. Yeah. And we're me-centered while we walk down the street and we're me-centered, all these things, but we also are in our intimate relationships or even our friendships. And that this piece of getting outside of ourselves and looking at the other person and then simultaneously continuing to remember, I don't know them. Who are they right now? Those two things together, really, if you just took that away, your relationships would transform. They would never be the same.
Yeah, I can definitely see how that would make such a huge, huge difference. That continued mutual work towards curiosity and understanding of the other, as opposed to the assumptions that we often make, in our, like you said, our humanness, right? This is what we do. I love that. I love it. I want to ask you this. I want to drop this in here because one of the exercises that I've done with you twice now is, I don't even know what you call it because I don't remember because it's so profound and earth shattering. At the end of it, you're just kind of what just happened there? But I know something amazing happened. It's the exercise where you put us in a triad. So you put us in 3 people and we are to embody the physicality of and the emotion around something that we're holding. And I think the last time we did it, it was around, you had given us a sentence stem. I think it might have even been around a family thing, or maybe that's just what I brought into it. But it's this exercise where 2 other people are not just witnessing you be in your free emotion, but they're really holding the space and container of safety for you. And it's so intimate and it's so powerful. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that. And, you can correct me, tell me what it's called and how it's done. And this, by the way, I don't think is something you'd probably just do in your living room with 2 other friends. You want a facilitator to go through something like this. But could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. And to that first piece, there is this real value in putting yourself in containers to practice, like deep practice containers. You can take a retreat to go do yoga or to do meditation, or you can take a workshop where someone else holds the space, whether you do that solo or whether you do it with a partner. There is a real value because there are places that we can go sometimes. It happens in therapy, it happens in coaching also, because somebody else holds the container.
So important.
Yeah. So it's super valuable. And then there's the work that we can take out of that into our lives and the ways that it's applicable. So they're both true. It kind of goes back to that first piece of like our own deep inner work and then our interpersonal work and then how this works in our lives. So all of that is really important. And I know that I actually have a name for that because there's different ways that expresses itself when John and I teach together or in other containers and other courses that I lead, and depending on the people and what they're there for. So the piece that I would speak to is twofold, which is first around embodiment and expression. And then the second piece is around what is possible when we're held and witnessed in love. And this actually goes back a little bit to that piece between solo practice and relational practice, that there's a lot of work that we can do on ourselves that is incredibly powerful and very important. And there are some things that, at least in my experience, don't quite get touched until they're witnessed and witnessed in love. And I would say the very definition of like transforming shadow into something else is where we bring something that is hidden forward and it's witnessed in love.
I love that.
Yeah, whether that is, an expression of something that comes from our family or something that has to do with fear or a part of ourselves that we don't express in front of other people. Like, again, the format that you're speaking to is, I would say, almost infinite in the ways that it could be played with. That is a really key piece that you pulled out, which is that it's witnessed in love.
Yeah, I love that you dropped that in there much, much more eloquently than I tried to describe it, by the way. But that's exactly, that was my experience of it. And I think the piece that I would love to draw out of that is, for the audience, more in particular, is the importance of, we bottle a lot up. And like you said, a lot of it can be processed on your own. And sometimes you can be doing that work in a vacuum. But the actual experience that I had was, number one, being given the permission to go there, knowing that I was in a safe container. And the witnessing part of it made it okay that I could have that emotion, whether it was anger or rage or feeling unloved or whatever it was that came up in the moment for myself and the other members of the triad that I was part of. It was the power of someone witnessing you and saying, that's okay. That emotion could start to, I don't know, it's like it loosens its grip on you. Like, oh, okay, I don't have to judge myself for that anymore.
Absolutely. And the piece that I want to add to that is we free others at the same time. Like I have no idea who was in your triad, but I can guarantee, and I don't even know what you brought so without knowing any of that, I can guarantee that your expression served them. So they witnessed you in love, and that had this whole deep process for you or impact on you. And I guarantee that something was freed in them where they said like, oh, it's actually okay to be like that because she just showed it.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Because of course, I was the recipient on carrying and witnessing on the other flip side when we switched, person. And of course, yeah, I can totally attest to that. And I also felt such a deep feeling of reverence and gratitude that somebody let me into that. It was just,
I love that.
Yeah, it was just this honor of like, oh my gosh, thank you. Like I have goosebumps now talking about it. It's just thank you for letting me in on that.
Yeah. And then we can kind of conceptually get it. And then when we're in the moment, we think like, there's no way this is a gift, but it really is.
Yeah.
And then I don't want to miss this piece of, which is, embodied expression. And this happens both solo and being witnessed in love. And I don't want to hate here, but I also, I got to say, like, in some ways, women and like coaches or personal growth junkies, like we're the worst because we can talk about things so much and we get it. We understand why we are the way we are and what had us be the way. And like, we can talk about it. We can process. And there's value in that. I'm not saying there's no value in it, but there's a limit. And so those of us who have that capacity and we're so self-aware and we can really, like we know all of it already. There is this other, there is this other piece, which is actually expressing it through our bodies and like letting go of the words. There can be sound, but it's not words. And then the full-bodied expression. And one of the reasons why a container like a workshop is valuable is like you said, there's the permission. So I had this experience recently where I was working basically a shame, not exactly a shame, but like a shadow process. And a part of myself that got triggered that was around not being taken care of and like gets really freaked out and nobody sees me and nobody listens to me. And there's a part of me like this. And I was working it on my own because that's just the space I had it held for a short period by a friend and a colleague. And then I said, oh yeah, I'm totally going to go do more of this when we get off the phone. And I had to go do something for my kids first. And then I came back and I didn't feel it anymore. And I was like, oh, it's not really there. It's not really authentic. Like I'm not feeling it.
Or it's gone. I resolved it. Like I do that too. I'm like, oh, I'm good with it now. I'm good. I don't feel it.
Yeah. Or it's just like, well, I'll wait till, like it's like, why would I generate it when it's not really there? And frankly, that's just the nature of shadow is it will take any excuse to hide and doesn't want to be seen and expressed. That's why it lives in the shadows is that there's some reason. And so for me, again, I can do this on my own, but I also admittedly have a lot of practice with this. And I was just like, is it okay for me to swear?
Yes, absolutely.
I was like, fuck it. You know what? I know enough to know that I should just do it anyway. And so I did. And I just brought it up and I fully expressed that part. And again, it was sound and there was like, the arms waving and there was sort of like my legs kicking or there was the full bodied expression that moves something that cannot be moved through words.
Yes. So I literally, the last time prior to learning to do this more, and I'm still like, I'm not there 100%. I'm still uptight about it. But like the last time I remembered actually giving myself permission to be embodied and express something physically was like, I could literally just see myself at like, I don't know, 8 or 5 having a temper tantrum. And kids do it so great, don't they? They just fully express, like fully embodied. And there's something that happens as we grow older. And I realized in that, one of the very first workshops I did around this work, which was several years ago, how uptight I was around that embodied piece. But then after giving myself, and again, being in a container where there's permission and safety to do it, it was so freeing. And whatever had to move through me in terms of a shadow piece or whatever it was, I found moved through me quicker.
Yes.
And just sitting there and journaling and doing all the intellectual gymnastics that I was used to doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, I don't know if I want to say harder exactly, but there's like, we have can have very strong resistance to doing it, but it can move so fast. And what years of therapy can, or journaling our own self-work and then can literally be done in 15 minutes.
Amazing. I love it.
And that is, I would say that is why John and I teach the workshops that we teach. That's why we teach the live workshops. I'm so happy you dropped
that in because that's where I was going to go next. Because we keep mentioning John and it's like, he's this,
like, who is John?
He's the ghost in the podcast. Like everyone's like, who's this John guy? Could you tell us a little, I have another fun question to ask you, but could you draw, because this was a perfect segue. We've dropped him in so many times. Tell us about John and these workshops you do, because I'm sure there's people listening that are, not going to try it on their own, and definitely some things you shouldn't, or maybe shouldn't is not a good word, but would be feel safer to do in a container, that would love to come and join you or you both. Can you tell us who he is?
Yeah. Well, you can also go just dive in and see who he is. His website is johnwineland.com. And he and I work I would say there's two distinct pieces, but the workshops that we lead are more specifically in the realm of romantic, intimate relationships, and not necessarily that they're for couples or that you have to be in a romantic, intimate relationship to come, but that's the realm that we work in. But we work a lot with this piece of embodiment, because really we got born into bodies. If we weren't meant to be embodied, we just wouldn't have been born in this realm. But our culture at large and the speed at which we move and all, it doesn't encourage that on a regular basis. So we're out of habit. We're out of habit of, the kind of breath that it takes to be embodied, the various practices that it takes, both to actually practice embodiment, again, in a solo way, and to stay embodied when we're in a relational moment, all the way from a conversation to, something where you're asking for what you want from a partner, all the way, frankly, to sex. Like, a lot of people eject from their bodies in those intense sexual moments, and then they wonder why they're not fulfilled. So we teach both in the realm of just, your practitioner and wanting to have these deeper relationships, more intimacy in your life. And the 6-month program that we lead, the Relationship and Intimacy Salon, is also for practitioners, facilitators, and coaches to not only take this into their personal lives, but to begin to learn the skills of how they might bring this to their clients.
I love that. Thank you for dropping that in. Beautiful. And I can say personally, from having participated with John and Kendra, that you will not regret attending ever. And one of the pieces now, before my fun piece, I have to bring in, because I was hearing you talk about this, and I was remembering my experience. And, a lot of the listeners, mainly women that are going to be listening, but some men as well. But for the women listening, I wanted to share with you guys some of, the results. And maybe, Kendra, you can speak quickly to this as well. One of the things I found from doing this work, both doing some of it before having met you, Kendra, and then the stuff that you and John do together and participating in that, is it started to blossom, is a good word for me, just this really solid, kind of grounded confidence in me that as a grown woman, I don't know if I experienced to that depth prior to starting to do this work. And I wonder if you can touch on that piece just a little bit with, both your own experience and what you observe with the women in particular, since this podcast is dedicated to shaking them up. What have you noticed around that? Because that was my experience. And when I first started, it was like terrifying, like, oh my God, I'm going to come undone. But it was the exact thing I needed to feel good, Yeah.
I love hearing that too, especially around like a grounded confidence. And although I don't know that we would, use those words when we're describing it, you spoke to something that I do feel personally, and that I do see women come away with, and especially women. Some of that I do think comes from the amount of energy that we use to sort of resist or hide or change parts of ourselves. And when we really come into the embodiment piece, it's like, oh, I am all of me. And you can even, there's a way when I say that, like, I want to make this round emotion and like sit down more firmly. Oh, I'm here. All of me is here. And through practices like the one that you mentioned, Giovanna, then you have it reflected to you also. Oh, all of you is here, and it's okay.
I love that. Thank
you. And what I really have heard in what I would say in a very like practical, tangible way, both in my life and then in the women who I work with, is specifically around wanting what you want and being able to ask for what you want, both romantically, sexually, professionally. Like, I see that across the board, that there's this dropping into even being able to know what you want, and then find the ways to bring that forward that feel good to you, that feel good to the other person or people. And where they're just you're much more likely to actually get what you want.
Oh my, I literally want to jump up and down in my chair with that one. I'm just like, yes, that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And you know, which one of us women does not need more of that? Thank you for sharing that. I love that. Love it. Okay, so here's for my fun one, okay? This is my fun, last question, because, so one of my family nicknames is the Witch Doctor. I kid you not. And I come from a family where natural remedies and plant life were the thing. You know, I remember going back to Italy 7 years ago, and my dad was taking us around, you know, the farmland, and everywhere we stopped, he's like, so this plant is good for this, and this plant is good if you burn yourself, and this one's good. And, you know, my niece who was with me at the time kind of looked at me and said, oh God, this is where you get it from. So it was kind of a funny moment, but I had to laugh because I was on your website, and one of the things that you list about yourself is that one of your superpowers is identifying edible plants, and that at one time you spotted the only ripe mango on an entire tree while driving 50 miles per hour on a twisted road. Do tell, Kendra, what is that all about?
Oh my God, it's such a fun story. And I actually just hearing you say that, though, I'm like, oh my God, we're like sisters. I totally am. I had this child that I used to nanny for. I remember she looked at me one time and she was like, Kendra, you know everything about plants. And I was like, well, not everything, but like a lot, I guess. Maybe relatively.
I mean, this is an amazing survival skill too. I mean, I can't identify edible plants, but I'm pretty good in the plant kingdom, and definitely with my little potions and oils and stuff. But I read this
and the herbal, the medicinal.
Yeah.
I was in Hawaii with my then fiance, and we were driving down the road that takes you to Kealakekua Bay, which is where you can, you know, go swim with dolphins just in the wild. And we were driving, and there was this I guess, you know, I mean, it was a mango tree because there was a mango on it, but I didn't even really see that. It was just like, you know, it's very, very windy. And I was like, stop. There's a mango. Like, we have to eat that mango. And to his credit, he did. And when I got out and realized, I was like, it's like on this cliff. Like, I couldn't actually get to it. And I had picked up a rock, and I don't even know where this comes from because I don't have like great throwing or aim skills. Like, that's not my superpower. But I threw this rock, and I like beamed it out of a tree on the first try, and it came down, and we went and like ate this mango, and it was fantastic.
So do you have like this laser vision? Did you smell it? Did you like intuitively know?
I think it's like laser vision and I used to do this when I lived I do it here too, but it's kind of everywhere. So it's less, you know, I live in more like a small town that has a lot of fruit trees around. But when I lived in Berkeley, I had it was like a mental map in my mind. We'd drive around and be like, oh my God, that's an apricot tree. Oh my God, that's a da-da-da-da. And like, I knew where all the ones were that were hanging over fences or like in public areas. Like
amazing.
I have like foraging somehow in my DNA.
I love that. Well, I give credit to my dad because when he helped me identify, like I can identify those things by the shape of the leaves. Because when I was little, we had every kind of tree in the backyard. And I had to ask you about that because when I read that on your website, totally unrelated, but completely related to me.
Oh, that's really fun.
Kendra, I've loved having you here. I've loved this conversation and every conversation we have, but I've loved that you're here and so honored and thankful that you shared your wisdom and your knowledge with us. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. This is really fun, Giovanna.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. And everyone listening, please go to kendracunov.com. The address will be in the show notes, along with some other information about Kendra and some of the information about the workshops that she has upcoming with John Wineland. And I'm so happy again to have you here. Tune in next week, guys, where we're going to have another amazing guest, and sending you so much love. We'll talk to you soon. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in, and keep rising, everyone. For books and resources related to today's episode, make sure you head over to sherisespodcast.com, and I'll see you there. If you've enjoyed today's episode, make sure you tune back in next week when I dive into more juicy topics to help make your life the best it can be. And hey, if you've enjoyed listening to the show and you love it, head on over to iTunes and leave me a rate and review and subscribe there to the show.